Hey Seattle, this is Naomi André. I am the Seattle Opera Scholar in Residence. When I'm not loving my time here in Seattle, I'm a professor at the University of Michigan. And I am here to tell you about a new opera called Blue, composed by Janine Tesori with the libretto by Tazewell Thompson, that was written and first performed in August of 2019, right before the pandemic, and it was supposed to go places and it wasn't able to, but the Seattle Opera is one of the early houses giving it a premiere here in Seattle in February. Blue is an opera that does many things at once that really get to what opera does. It's not a huge opera, but it's a big topic. It's not a small opera. It's in 2 acts and a prologue and an epilogue, but it seems to cover such big themes. It actually covers universal themes in a very specific context. So lots of people can watch this, whether you look like the people on stage or not, and have a connection with these big themes. This is an opera that at heart is about a family and a community. It's about a mother and a father who are expecting their first child. It's about the girlfriends who support the mom. It's about the police buddies who support the father, who is a rookie policeman. And it's about this community that deals with love and comradeship. Art around Black subjects is a complicated thing because it's doing many things at once usually. It's giving a voice that's usually the voice that isn't centered in our mainstream culture. It's dealing with the legacy, particularly here in the United States, of slavery, the Middle Passage, of Jim Crow, of really tough things, as well as there's a lot of joy in the Harlem Renaissance. There's a lot of joy with the music and the art and what was happening even in these difficult situations. And so there's an element in this opera that it is bringing a lot of joy and celebrating wonderful things. That's all new and wonderful. This opera also does something that a lot of Black art does with the difficulties, with the heaviness, the trauma that we get. And the trauma in this opera is that we have the son who was so eagerly awaited and who's so loved as he's growing up and has such a community. We have the son is killed through police violence, and that is a trauma that is horrifying. It's mitigated a little bit in the fact that we get to see how to deal with this trauma. We see the community come together. We see the one-on-one as the father has lost his faith, lost his way, and he doesn't go off and do something violent. He goes to the reverend. As you'll see, he almost threatens to do something, but he goes to get the help he needs. And then you see the mother with her girlfriends, this time in the second act, and the mother is silent in her mourning as the girlfriends now are preparing her for the memorial service. The girlfriends are there. They're holding her. All the promises from the first act of we are here to be your community, they're there when she needs them, even in the worst situation. So this is a story that has an awful trauma, an awful sadness, and yet it's an opera where we're used to trauma in opera, and it helps us get through that, or at least to see something a little different than just leaving us with the pain. One of the things about Blue, and I'm going to say this about opera in general, there's always a political angle about what was happening. Operas after the French Revolution or leading up to it, such as Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro. If you know about the French Revolution and you think about the class struggles going on, it adds a layer to our understanding of Figaro. But it's not the only way to understand Figaro. There's so much that happens in it. We also can bring this same argument around Blue. We are going through in the United States, here in Seattle, in many cities, issues around what is the role of how we govern ourselves and how is this manifested in our police force. You can focus on that with Blue because the father, a Black policeman, loses his son. And so embedded in this is this element of a political nature. And that's fine to think about those things, but it's not the only thing. And dare I say, it's not really the main thing of what Blue is doing. Blue is set in our time, but it's set in a time where there's tension. And the tension is reflected in the family. The family is loving, the family goes through problems, the family recovers from the problems. The community around the family, the girlfriends, the police buddies, the reverend, they are all part of this world. Yes, they live in a political time, like every time is. And yet the family, I would say, is the really big thing. There's a wonderful moment when the father tells the police buddies, he goes to the bar and he's telling them, yes, I have a child, the baby's been born, and it's a son, and the police buddies, they are thrilled that it's a son. And then they have this incredible number where they say, welcome to the daddy club, and you are now in baby jail. He will wake up and you will have no idea what it is. Earache, eye ache, mouth problems, croup. And the father says, croup? And so you just feel like you're in this world. So yes, it's in a political situation, but perhaps the biggest political situation is that we're seeing the intimacy and the love of a middle-class Black family, and we have not had that on the opera stage before. Blue is an opera that came out of a commission from Glimmerglass Opera that Francesca Zambello, the general director, decided she wanted to support new works and new voices. Jeanine Tesori is a composer who writes so comfortably on multiple stages. Fun Home, Caroline or Change are musical theater works that have won awards and that have really touched the heart of a lot of issues. Soft Power by David Henry Wong, which brings in Asian American issues. She was the vocal producer for West Side Story. So she has done so much when it comes to representing many different voices. On the opera stage, Jeanine Tesori's Blue is not her first opera. She's written some others, and she's currently working on other projects. But Blue does something unlike any other opera. It takes the story of people, African Americans, Black folks from a middle-class family, and shows their love, their joy, their expecting a child, the joy of having a child. It does all of this, which is wonderful in life, but to get it in the opera stage and to have this with Black folks is a little unusual. Tazewell Thompson is our librettist, and he is somebody who is at home with opera as a director. He is somebody who is a playwright who directs spoken theater. And so bringing them together, this was their first collaboration, but it ended up being such a beautiful thing with them working together. I had the really good fortune of getting to know them early on. I was involved with a Glimmerglass, Breaking Glass panel that Jeanine Tesori, Tazewell Thompson, and some other folks, the mother and the father in Blue, were singing arias as they were being workshopped. And we got to, in fact, that was my first trip to Seattle when I got to be here with the Breaking Glass panel. And we were talking about Porgy and Bess as well as the opera Blue that was still being written. Tazewell Thompson and Jeanine Tesori are two people who have loads of experience and yet coming together as an interracial team. Jeanine Tesori is a white woman, Tazewell Thompson is a Black man, and they present this microcosm of what it is like to work together to tell a story about racial and ethnic themes that is complicated and hard for today. They do it with so much mutual respect and care. And it was wonderful to be on panels watching them and seeing this develop. This is a story that talks about the African American community, and yet when you're a composer and a librettist working together, the story is really shared. One person is giving the words, the other person is voicing it in the music. And yet, when in conversations I had with Jeanine Tesori and Tazewell Thompson, it was really clear that they both felt connections to it. However, Jeanine herself says, this is really Tazewell's story. This is set in the present, in Harlem, New York, of the present. Tazewell Thompson lives there, and a lot of this is drawn from people he sees every day. He was thinking that the family, the father, would be a jazz musician, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because Tazewell Thompson's father was a jazz musician. However, as the compositional team and Francesca Zambello were talking about it, they thought, you know, a jazz musician is a great story, but what would happen if we made this father a policeman? And what would happen if we would hear the story from a black world with a policeman whose son is killed by another policeman? And so we have this incredible drama wrapped up just from the get-go, that we have a father who's raised his son, probably has gone to police picnics, has probably played with other children, and then when the boy becomes a young man in his teens, all of a sudden he's seen differently, and somebody in the city who might not know who the son is sees the son at a protest and ends up killing him. There is the drama right there. Jeanine Tesori is our composer, and she and Tazewell Thompson have worked beautifully together, and they have understood each other. And yet there's an element of where the understanding, how much can you have allies and people who are adding to this story? How much can you know? What does it mean to be outside the experience and yet express it in the music? And Jeanine has talked about this. In fact, in her words, she talks about the police violence in today's political climate. And she says, quote, "For me, Tazewell has the underlying rights to the story because it is so connected to his experience in the world. That to me is what reparations looks like. It is to acknowledge that the story does not belong to me." She moves through these spaces really carefully, and she uses a lot of humility. She admits sometimes, quote, "I feel scared, I feel uncomfortable, but I don't feel like exiting." And that staying in, to me, is the invitation to be in specific dialogue. She continues, quote, "I know that it is my responsibility to go deep or don't go. So if I'm going to be writing in a community, I better know as much as I can possibly know without truly knowing with a big K. Otherwise, I should stay out." And when I heard Jeanine Tesori say this, I thought, this is what an interaction, an interracial collaboration is. This is a microcosm of what it is like to bring these stories out and to have them voiced. We have Tazewell's words and his world of the story, and we have Jeanine Tesori taking those words, listening to him, and having this move into an opera. In fact, a story Jeanine told me was when she was writing this opera, she got the libretto. She and Tazewell had spoken a lot about the story and how it would work, and they went through different versions. And then when they found a version that he felt comfortable with, she asked him to come over and to read the libretto to her so she could hear it in his voice with his undulations, with his pauses. And that really helped her get a sense of, okay, how do I set this? What do I repeat? What don't I repeat? What goes up? What comes down? So she was really working with his interpretation of the words, not just the meaning of the words. There is something in this opera that captures, again, it's almost uncanny. It captures this universal within the specific experience. So me, watching it, and somebody who loves opera, who goes to the opera all the time, and yet when I saw particularly those three girlfriends in Act 1, Scene 1, keep on keeping on, keep on keeping on, watch me. I was like, that's me. I know these women. Yeah, hi, I'm joining. Oh my gosh, you got married? You didn't tell me? What are you having? You're having a baby, you're very pregnant. Oh my goodness. It was this sense, I've never had it in the opera house before, but I felt like I could jump up on stage and they were talking to me. There was this immediacy. And I think, yes, seeing three black women, or four black women, the three girlfriends and the mom, really made that come alive. But I get the sense that anybody today, there's a certain contemporaneous element to it, where, you know, get out! Are you serious? What's going on? It just feels very today. And having an opera that talks about the joy of falling in love, getting married, getting pregnant, there's something really special and very today about it. And I think it comes from Tazewell's background as a playwright and somebody who knows theater history. There's an element almost of a Greek tragedy to this, in that you've got a situation that can be adapted for lots of different people with their different experiences. The overall thought of family, what that means, the overall issue of authority and what happens when it's corrupt, the overall issue of losing somebody who is too young to be taken so violently from us. But additionally, we have this element of who the characters are. Nobody has a name that's personal to them only. The father is named the father. The mother is named the mother. And there are sort of a chorus of 3 girlfriends who are around the mother right in the beginning. And then there are 3 police buddies who are around the father. And then at the end, we begin to get everybody coming together in the church. So we have the community of the girlfriends and the police buddies who we already know. And yet there's something that's so wide open that we all have buddies. We all have girlfriends. And there's the reverend and that spiritual advisor who is there to give comfort, not to judge, not to tell the father that he doesn't have any right to his suffering, to his anger, to his anguish, but to be there by him as a religious comforter, as a good friend should be, and who is there in the community. One of the themes in opera that I've noticed as a scholar, and I'll even say my work hooks into a feminist scholarship, sort of centering where's the role of women, what's the function of women in operas. As we know, a lot of operas have this element of a masculinity sort of gone wrong, a type of toxic masculinity. Think of the court of Rigoletto, where the Duke is able to womanize and gets away with it. And then we see the horror of that when Rigoletto, his own daughter, he had mocked another, Monterone's daughter, but then his own daughter gets hurt. Blue is an opera where you've got a very strong father, which is nice to see, a strong black man who is an upholder of the law of the land. And yet he is not the only man in there. You have the reverend who's about healing and caring for his community. This is not a case of operas with our toxic male characters who somehow are in their own sort of Shakespearean tragedy of jealousy and rage and sadness. This is a case of a man who is a mature man, who goes through the transformation of being a regular guy in a hoodie that you'll see up front, who changes into his police officer blues. This is a man who's transformed from a loving husband into a father. And this is a man who's also transformed from a man who is a father to a man who is grieving the loss of his son. We see this with the women too. The mother is a girlfriend, then she's a wife, and she gives birth and becomes a mother, and then she becomes a grieving mother. So you get the sense of transformation and a more three-dimensional humanity. This opera is named Blue, which hooks to a lot of different ideas. Most obviously is the fact that it's a story about a police family and the police blues that the father wears every day as he is an officer of the law. However, if you think of the musical styles used in the opera, there are many African American styles in there, and hints of the blues, hints of jazz, hints of gospel are right there embedded in the musical fabric. So blue refers to the world of the policeman, the musical world. Blue is what this opera is about. We get lots of musical idioms in here, and some are just a sort of 21st century Janine Tesori style of having melody, following the undulations of the vocal line, and some are very much connected to jazz as well as sort of a gospel style, almost spiritual hymn. And this happens, it is alluded to in the second act, in the beginning of the second act, with the duet between the reverend and the father, as the reverend tells the father to try to lay his burden down, and it's a descending motive. And then this is what's picked up in the big service, the memorial service. And it is incredible when you've got the mother, the father, the reverend, the 6 chorus members, the 3 girlfriends, the 3 police buddies who are now just part of the community. These incredible operatic voices singing a moving, descending, lamenting figure. And it feels as though you go to church in this, and there's a comfort in this, even though it's incredibly painful. There's a sense of the music encompassing us, as music so frequently does in the Black church. One of my favorite moments in the opera happens early on in the first act, scene 1, where the mother is there with her 3 girlfriends, and you can tell that they go far back. However, as sometimes happens, your life goes on, and all of a sudden you need to catch up. And so the 3 girlfriends come, and the opening lines are urgent, you must come quickly. And we find out that the mother, who is very pregnant, is telling her girlfriends, hey, I got married, and I'm pregnant, and I need my girlfriends here. And the girlfriends are like, wait, what is this? What's going on? And the mother they say, who is he? Who have you married? And the mother begins to talk about the man she has fallen in love with.
Everything about him is big, big frame, big smile, big eyes, big ears, big head full of big ideas.
Yet as she talks about it, there's almost a feeling as like we walk through that experience as though we're just learning and we are remembering what it's like with somebody who gets under our skin in a wonderful way. And she talks about this love being so big, and she says, go figure. And this go figure idea is just this wonderful little turn of phrase, but it lets us see that it's new in the relationship, there's such joy there, and so this first aria, go figure, just sort of encapsulates who these women are. They let something wonderful happen and marvel at it. There's this wonderful musical motif that happens, sort of a descending figure that we hear in the accompaniment, first in this aria, that sort of follows. Almost as a connective tissue to the Go Figure aria of pause and reflection, and you're going to love it when you first hear it. It sort of stands out, and it's this first really big lyrical moment in the work. We are living in a time where I would say, and not lightly, a golden age of Black opera. And by Black opera, I mean operas that talk about Black experiences, not in an old-fashioned negative stereotypes, but as real, three-dimensional, well-rounded characters. One of the good things that I found out in my research, and other people are bringing to light, is that Black people have been involved in opera for a long time, going back to the 19th century. even during the time, the antebellum period with slavery. We have people like Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield, who was born a slave, was manumitted by her former owner, given voice lessons because she had an incredible singing talent, and she was singing before Queen Victoria in the 1850s. There's Ciceretta Jones, who was singing at the end of the 19th century, and she had her own, she was called the Black Patti in homage to Adelina Patti, an important Italian opera singer. And here the Black Patti, Ciceretta Jones, had her own troupe of singers, and they would sing opera arias, they would sing, do different skits and shows. So Black participation in opera goes back to the 19th century. Early on, right after the Civil War, we have records of operas by all Black companies. So there's something just incredible that we've got a Black participation in opera. We also have Black composers who are writing operas. One of the earliest we know of is Harry Lawrence Freeman, and he has an opera called Voodoo from 1914. We then have Scott Joplin's Treemonisha, which thankfully he published a piano vocal score, so we have that. We know he wrote other operas, but sadly they have not survived. And so we have different operas, William Grant Still. There's so many others. The summer of 2019 brought so many great things for Black opera. I'm going to talk about 3 operas really quickly. Blue, our centerpiece opera now, with libretto by Tazewell Thompson and music by Janine Tesori, was commissioned by Glimmerglass Opera and performed there in upstate New York. The second opera that you've probably heard of is Terence Blanchard's Fire Shut Up in My Bones, which was commissioned by Opera Theater St. Louis and opened the Metropolitan Opera seasons in September of 2021 after being closed for the pandemic, and has gotten a lot of attention. The first opera by a Black composer being performed at the Metropolitan Opera in their 139-year history. The third opera I'll mention quickly is Anthony Davis's The Central Park Five, premiered by Long Beach Opera in California. And this is an opera that has gone on to be the first opera by a Black composer that has won the Pulitzer Prize. What a joy it is to talk to you about Blue. I'm an opera lover, as you know, but this opera has a special meaning. I've gotten to know Tazewell Thompson and Janine Tesori as they were workshopping this opera. I've been fortunate to see this opera in early performances, and there is something about I'm almost on the opera stage with these different characters if I were a singer, and I'm more of a shower singer. So I hope you enjoy watching and seeing this unique story, and I look forward to seeing you in Seattle at the opera.